came home late that night, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. The house was dark, except for the dim glow of the kitchen light that leaked into the hallway. I remember the smell of something burnt hanging in the air, probably the dinner I didn't get a chance to eat. She had stopped cooking for me weeks ago, but this time it was as if she'd forgotten she even started. I walked into the living room, and there she was, curled up on the couch. Not asleep, not waiting for me like she used to, just scrolling on her phone. Her face lit up with that cold glow of the screen. She didn't even look up when I came in, just mumbled a hey, like I was an afterthought in my own home. No hug, no smile, no questions about my day. I didn't say anything at first, but something hit me in that moment. There had been a lot of nights like this lately, too many, and it wasn't just her being distant. It was as if she'd become a ghost in our life, moving through the house like a stranger. I knew something was off, but for the last month or two, I'd been too blind, or maybe too scared to really confront it. I dropped my bag by the door and made my way to the kitchen, pouring myself a drink. My mind was racing. This was wrong. I had no proof, but I couldn't shake the feeling, that gnawing unease I'd been trying to drown with work, distractions. Anything to avoid dealing with what was in front of me. She had changed. Not in some obvious way, but in the little ways that only a husband notices. The way she used to joke with me about stupid things, how she'd meet me at the door after a long day, how we used to sit and talk over dinner. All of it gone. And then there was her phone, always attached to her hand, always buzzing with messages. And I'd always ask, like an idiot, who's texting? And every single time, her answer was a flat, almost rehearsed, oh, it's just Sarah. We're planning the girls' trip. Sarah's trip. The one she'd conveniently forgotten to invite me to. I leaned against the counter, the cold glass in my hand doing nothing to calm my nerves. It was gnawing at me now, that feeling stronger than ever. Something didn't add up. I walked back into the living room. She didn't even flinch as I sat across from her, sipping her tea and scrolling like I wasn't even there. I could feel the words bubbling up in my chest, but I swallowed them down, trying to keep my cool. But then, just as I was about to get up and head to bed, I saw it. Her phone flashed. A message popped up on her screen, but it wasn't from Sarah. It was from someone named Jay, and it read, "Can't stop thinking about earlier? When can we meet again?" I froze. My body went numb, as if every muscle had locked up in place. Her thumb quickly slid across the screen, hiding the message as if nothing had happened, but it was too late. I saw it. She glanced up at me for a split second, her face betraying nothing but mild annoyance, like I'd interrupted her night. But she knew. She knew what I had seen, and for a brief moment, her eyes darted toward the door, like she was calculating an escape. I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to. I wanted to scream, to grab her phone and throw it against the wall. But instead, I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, waiting for her to explain, to lie, to pretend like everything was still okay. I couldn't stay silent any longer. My throat tightened as I forced the words out. "Who's Jay?" Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't panic. She didn't look guilty. She didn't even hesitate. Instead, she put her phone down gently, as if this was just another ordinary conversation, like I'd asked her what she wanted for dinner. "What do you mean, Danny?" She said it with this fake confusion, eyes wide, the perfect performance. Her voice was calm, too calm, but I wasn't buying it. I stood up, trying to keep my cool, but the adrenaline was already rushing through me. Pointed at her phone. "The message, Amanda. Who's Jay? And don't give me that, I don't know what you're talking about crap." I saw it. She rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes at me. "Oh my God, Danny. You're being ridiculous." She shifted on the couch, crossing her legs, clearly annoyed. "It's just Justin. From work. We've been going over some new projects. You know this. I've told you about him." Her tone was clipped, like I was wasting her time with my questions. Justin. There it was again. That same name she'd casually thrown around before, always in the background, like some character I wasn't supposed to worry about. I could feel my pulse in my ears, but I pushed on. "You've been working late with Justin a lot lately, haven't you?" My voice was low now but steady. "And what was that about thinking about earlier? What exactly were you two doing earlier, Amanda?" For the first time, I saw her falter. Just for a second, her eyes flickered, like she was weighing her options. But then she snapped back, her expression hardening. You know, Danny, if you're going to start acting like some paranoid freak, I don't have to explain every little thing to you. There it was, deflection. Suddenly, this wasn't about the message anymore. It was about me, my supposed insecurities, my paranoia. She was flipping the script like she always did, making it seem like I was the crazy one. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. You're lying? I said quietly, my hands shaking despite my efforts to keep calm. I know you're lying. You've been sneaking around for weeks, Amanda. And now I have proof. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into this twisted smile. Proof? You're hilarious, Danny. What are you going to do? Check my phone. Go through my messages. She was taunting me now, daring me to make a move. It was as if she had already decided I wasn't worth the truth, like I was too weak to do anything about it. But I was done playing her games. You think I'm an idiot? You think I haven't noticed how distant you've been? The constant texting, the secretive calls, how you're never home anymore. My voice rose, the anger bubbling over now. What the hell happened to us, Amanda? For a second, she just stared at me, like she was deciding how much to reveal, how much to lie. And then, without missing a beat, she stood up, smoothing out her clothes like we were in some polite argument about dirty dishes or whose turn it was to take out the trash. You're pathetic, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. All you do is sit around, waiting for me to screw up. Maybe if you actually paid attention to our marriage instead of your stupid job, we wouldn't be in this mess. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't even pretending to be innocent anymore. She was flipping it all on me, acting like I was the one who had driven her to this. I took a step closer, my heart racing. So you admit it then? You're screwing around with him? That's what this is. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second I saw something, fear, maybe, or regret, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She crossed her arms, standing her ground. You know what, Danny? If you're so convinced I'm cheating, then maybe I should be. Her voice was cold, her face unreadable, like she had already decided she didn't care about the consequences. My stomach dropped. The room felt like it was spinning. This was the moment I'd been dreading. The one where the person you thought you knew best becomes a stranger right before your eyes. She grabbed her phone off the couch and started walking toward the bedroom, like she was done with this whole conversation. I'm going to bed. You can sleep on the couch tonight if you're going to act like this. And just like that, she walked out, leaving me standing there, gripping the edge of the coffee table so hard my knuckles turned white, wondering how the hell I'd missed the signs. But the real question was, what was I going to do about it now? She walked out on me, as if I didn't matter, as if everything we built was nothing but dust under her feet. The door to our bedroom clicked shut behind her, the final punctuation to her little show of dominance. She thought it was over, but I wasn't finished. I stood there for what felt like hours, my mind racing, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. Every part of me wanted to kick that door open, grab her phone, and make her admit it. Make her say the words I knew were hanging in the air between us. But what good would it do? She'd lie again, twist things around, and somehow, by the end of it, I'd be the one apologizing for her betrayal. I knew how it would go. She was an expert at it. No, this time I had to be smarter. I needed proof. Real proof. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to sit around while she treated me like an idiot. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, scrolling through old messages and emails, trying to piece together everything I had overlooked. There had to be something, some trail she hadn't covered. And then I remembered. Amanda was scheduled to go on her girls' trip in 2 days. That damn trip she'd been gushing about for weeks. The one she'd conveniently not invited me on. She said she was going with Sarah and a couple of other friends from work. But something about that trip always felt off. I opened our shared calendar, looking at the dates, the hotel bookings. Everything was in place, all lined up perfectly. Too perfectly. An idea started to form, a dangerous one. If she was planning to meet Justin on this trip, it would be the perfect opportunity to catch her red-handed. But I couldn't just confront her then and there. She'd worm her way out of it like she always did. I needed a witness, someone she couldn't manipulate. Someone who would see the truth and hold her accountable. Her father. I don't know why I thought of him first, but it made sense. Her dad was an old-school guy, military background, believed in family, loyalty, honor, values Amanda clearly didn't give a damn about anymore. If I brought him with me, if he saw what I saw, there'd be no hiding from it. No more excuses, no more lies. I knew where the girls were supposedly staying, and I could easily find out when she and Justin were meeting up. All I had to do was act like everything was normal until then. Pretend I was still clueless. Still the stupid, trusting husband she thought I was. I hated playing the part, but I knew it was the only way. So I took a deep breath and made the call. Amanda's acting weird again. I told her father, keeping my voice calm, casual. She's been working late, hanging out with some guy from work a lot. Justin, I think his name is. I'm sure it's nothing, but I don't know, Dad. Something feels off. I thought maybe you could talk to her. Get a feel for what's going on. I didn't give him all the details, not yet. I knew he was protective of her, but I also knew he had a low tolerance for dishonesty. If I played my cards right, he'd take my side when the time came. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him sigh. Danny, I'll talk to her, but you know how she is. She's strong-willed, like her mother. She probably just needs space. You know, work can be stressful. It's probably nothing. I bit my tongue, knowing full well that he had no idea what was really happening. Yeah, you're probably right, I said, pretending to agree. But do me a favor. Let me know if she mentions anything to you. I don't want to make something out of nothing. I hung up, the knot in my stomach tightening. I had to play this just right. I couldn't come off as desperate or paranoid. If I tipped Amanda off that I was onto her, she'd cover her tracks better. I couldn't afford that. The next few days were torture. I watched her go through the motions, pretending like everything was fine. She laughed at dinner, told me about her work meetings, and packed her bags for the girls' trip, like it was all perfectly normal. But I could see through it now, the way her eyes never quite met mine, the way her phone buzzed constantly with messages she would glance at and quickly hide. She thought I was still clueless. That's what kept her comfortable. The day before the trip, I watched her get into the car with Sarah, all smiles and fake excitement. "Love you," she called out with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted me to think everything was fine. I watched her drive off, heart pounding, but I didn't respond. I waited an hour, then made my move. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and called her father again. "I need you to come with me," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "There's something I need to show you." He hesitated for a moment. "What's going on, Danny?" I took a deep breath, knowing this was it. "I'll explain everything when we get there. But trust me, you're going to want to see this." We drove in silence, my mind a whirlwind of everything that had led up to this. All the lies, the nights she came home late, the texts from Jay. This was the moment I'd been building toward, the one that would shatter everything. I wasn't ready for what I'd find, but I knew it had to happen. And when it did, there'd be no turning back. No more pretending. No more lies. This was the endgame. The drive to the hotel felt like it took forever. I sat in the passenger seat, gripping my phone like it was a lifeline, my mind replaying every moment from the past few months in a never-ending loop. The way Amanda's laughter had shifted from genuine to forced. The countless excuses. The way she'd brush me off with a kiss on the cheek, like I was some clueless puppy, wagging its tail while she snuck out the door. But tonight, the lies ended. Her father, Tom, drove in silence. He hadn't asked any more questions after I told him I needed him to come. Maybe he didn't want to know yet, or maybe he already had an idea of what was happening but couldn't bring himself to say it out loud. He loved Amanda, but he wasn't blind. I think a part of him sensed what was about to unravel. As we pulled into the parking lot of the hotel Amanda was supposedly staying at, my heart was in my throat. I had tracked her location on our shared app, something she didn't even know I had set up a while ago, thinking it would be a fun way to surprise each other when one of us was nearby. Now it felt like a lifeline. Her dot was there, right in the middle of the hotel alongside his dot. Tom parked the car, and I sat there for a second, gathering myself. My hands were sweating, heart racing like I was about to walk into some war zone. But I had no choice. This was the moment of truth. "Danny," Tom said finally, his voice low, What's going on? You've been quiet this whole time. I took a deep breath and turned to him. I'm about to show you something, and it's not going to be easy. I'm sorry to drag you into this, but I need you to see it for yourself. His face hardened, concern shifting into something more serious. What the hell is this about, Danny? Is Amanda in some kind of trouble? In a way, yeah, I said, my voice tight. You'll see. I got out of the car, and he followed me, confusion written all over his face. I could barely think straight, my body running on pure adrenaline. We walked up to the entrance, and as soon as we stepped inside the lobby, I spotted the elevators. I knew exactly where she was. Room 315. As we waited for the elevator, Tom finally spoke again. If you don't tell me what's going on, I'm not taking another step. What are we doing here? I turned to him, every word feeling like sandpaper in my throat. She's not on a girls' trip, Tom. She's here with him. His eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and anger flashing across his face. With who? What are you talking about? She's been seeing some guy from work. Justin. They've been sneaking around for weeks. I've suspected it, but tonight, I have the proof. I could barely say the words without shaking. I brought you here because I need you to see it too. You need to see the kind of person she's become. Tom stood there, his face going pale, his fists clenched at his sides. You're saying my daughter is cheating on you? I nodded, my stomach twisted in knots. I wish I was wrong. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and we stepped inside. The ride up to the third floor felt like it lasted forever. Neither of us said anything, the air thick with tension. Tom's jaw was tight, and I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. I almost felt bad for him, but I knew it had to be done. When we reached the third floor, I led the way down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. My heart was hammering in my chest. I could see the door to room 315 at the end of the hall, and every step felt like a countdown to the explosion. I stopped in front of the door, my hand hovering above the handle for a moment. There was no turning back now. Tom stood beside me, his face hard and unreadable. Danny, he started, but I cut him off. You need to see this, I whispered, and then, without another second of hesitation, I knocked. There was a shuffle behind the door, a couple of hushed voices, and then the sound of footsteps approaching. I could feel the blood rushing to my head, the whole world narrowing down to this one single moment. The handle turned, and the door cracked open just enough for me to see him. Justin, shirtless, his face a mix of confusion and alarm. He didn't even get a chance to speak before I pushed the door wide open, storming inside. And there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed in nothing but a robe, her hair messy, cheeks flushed. She froze when she saw me, and then she saw her father. Danny. What the hell are you doing here? Amanda's voice cracked with panic as she quickly pulled the robe tighter around her, scrambling off the bed. But I didn't answer her. I turned to Tom, whose face had gone completely white. He didn't say a word. He just stared at her, at the mess of the room, at Justin standing there, stunned like a deer caught in headlights. This is what I wanted you to see, I said quietly, my voice barely steady. This is who your daughter really is. Amanda's eyes darted between me and her father, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the right lie fast enough. It's not what it looks like, Dad. I swear. This isn't. Shut up, Tom growled, his voice low and dangerous. I'd never heard him sound like that before. His eyes were burning into her, filled with a mix of disgust and disbelief. Don't you dare. The silence that followed was suffocating. Amanda looked like she was about to collapse, her perfect facade crumbling into pieces right in front of me. I felt an odd sense of satisfaction watching her scramble, trying to find the right excuse, but knowing she was out of them. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes pleading. Danny, please, let's just talk about this. It's not. But I didn't let her finish. Don't bother coming back, Amanda. My voice was calm now, eerily calm, like all the rage had drained out of me and left nothing but cold certainty. We're done. And with that, I turned my back on her, walked out of that room, and left her standing there with the mess she'd made, her father glaring at her like she was nothing more than a stranger. I didn't look back as I walked down that hotel hallway, leaving the wreckage behind me. Every step felt like I was shedding a weight that had been crushing me for months. But even as I got into the elevator and felt the doors close behind me, I couldn't shake the numbness settling in. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was just emptiness. Tom stayed behind. I didn't know what he was saying to her, but I imagined it wasn't pretty. The look on his face when he saw Amanda with that guy, Justin, said everything. He didn't need me to explain what was happening. She couldn't lie her way out of it, not with her father standing there, seeing it all laid bare. But me, I was done with the whole scene. I couldn't stand the sight of her anymore. The hotel lobby was eerily quiet, my footsteps echoing in the wide-open space. People moved around me, minding their own business, living their lives like nothing monumental had just happened on the third floor. But my life, my marriage, was shattered, torn apart by a woman who didn't give a damn about anyone but herself. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me like a slap in the face. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty street, trying to let everything sink in. What had just happened felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare and was waiting to wake up. But the reality was, there was no waking up from this. This was it. This was my life now. As I leaned against the side of the building, I could feel the anger bubbling back up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something, to let out the rage that had been building up for so long. But instead, I just stood there, fists clenched, trying to breathe through it. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the fact that she hadn't cared enough to even hide it well. She had taken me for a fool, expecting me to never find out. And when I did, she had laughed in my face. Couldn't let her get away with that. After a few minutes, Tom came out of the hotel. His face was hard, his usual warmth replaced with something dark, something I'd never seen from him before. He walked over to me, his jaw tight, his fists still clenched at his sides. He stopped in front of me, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't even know what to say," he muttered, voice rough. "I thought I raised her better than this." He looked down at the ground, his hands trembling slightly. God, I don't even know what I thought. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I knew he was in shock, trying to process the fact that his daughter, the one he'd always been so proud of, was capable of something like this. It wasn't just my world that had shattered tonight. His did too. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes heavy with regret. "I'm sorry, Danny. You didn't deserve this. No one deserves this." I nodded, unable to find words. He didn't need to apologize. Amanda's actions were her own. But hearing it from him made the weight feel a little easier to bear. "What did she say?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to know. Tom sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "She tried to lie at first. Said it was nothing, that it wasn't what it looked like." He scoffed, shaking his head in disgust. "But when I pressed her," she cracked. "She admitted it. She's been seeing this guy for months, sneaking around behind your back. She had the nerve to tell me she was planning to leave you, that she didn't think you two were working anymore." I felt my chest tighten. Planning to leave me? She hadn't even had the guts to tell me herself, instead choosing to play the sick game until I caught her. Unbelievable. "And then what?" I asked, needing to hear it all. Tom hesitated, like he didn't want to tell me the rest. But he finally sighed. "She tried to blame you, said you were too wrapped up in work, that you didn't care about her anymore. That's why she drifted." I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. She had been crafting her excuses for months, trying to spin the story in her favor. And she'd probably been planning to drop that bomb on me whenever it suited her, making me out to be the bad guy. Typical Amanda, always the victim in her own story. Tom looked at me, his face softening just a little. "I told her she was full of it, that she had no right to throw away her marriage like this, to hurt you like this. I raised her better than this, but..." He trailed off, the words stuck in his throat. "I'm sorry, Danny. I don't know what else to say." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, Tom. She made her choices." We stood there for a few more minutes, the silence stretching out between us. I could tell Tom was struggling with what to do next. I mean, what does a father do in a situation like this? He loved his daughter, but he was furious with her. He cared about me, but his loyalty was torn. I didn't envy him at all. Finally, Tom cleared his throat. "I'll talk to her again. I don't know what good it'll do, but I'll try." You need anything, you call me. I'm on your side here. I nodded, appreciating the gesture. But deep down, I knew this was beyond fixing. No conversation was going to make this better. Amanda had shown me exactly who she was. I wasn't going to forget that. Tom patted me on the shoulder, gave me one last sad look, and walked off toward his car. I watched him leave, feeling the full weight of everything hit me all over again. She was really gone. Not physically. She'd come back for her things eventually, I was sure of that. But the Amanda I thought I knew, the woman I'd loved for years, she was gone. And all that was left was a stranger with her face. A liar who had been living in my house, sharing my bed, making a fool of me for God knows how long. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty street, the night air cold against my skin. I knew what had to happen next. There was no coming back from this. No fixing it. No marriage counseling, no apologies, no second chances. It was over. Completely over. I pulled out my phone, took a deep breath, and started typing a message to Amanda. You've got one day to come pick up your stuff. After that, I'm changing the locks. I don't want to see you. We're done. I hit send. And just like that, the chapter was closed. The message was sent, and with it, the final thread between us was severed. I stood there, staring at the screen as if the words themselves had weight, as if they'd pull me down into some abyss. But nothing happened. No lightning struck. No ground opened up beneath me. Just silence. Amanda didn't reply. Not right away, at least. I hadn't expected her to. She was probably still at the hotel, scrambling to figure out how to spin this, maybe even trying to salvage whatever she had with Justin. It didn't matter anymore. I had made my decision. I went home that night, and the house felt hollow. The silence in our living room was different now. It wasn't the comfortable quiet I used to love after a long day. This was an oppressive kind of emptiness, the kind that creeps into your bones and makes you feel small. I walked past the couch where she'd sat just hours ago, scrolling through her phone, pretending everything was fine. I could still see her there, the way she brushed off my questions, her face so calm, so detached. God, she'd been playing me all along. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her with him, sitting on that hotel bed like our life together meant nothing. And the worst part? The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how long this had been going on. All the signs I'd ignored, the weird excuses, the nights she didn't come home until late. I'd brushed it off because I didn't want to believe she was capable of this. But she was. She was more than capable. The next morning, I got up early. I couldn't stay in bed, staring at the ceiling, letting my mind spiral. I had things to do. I had to get her out of my life, out of my space, out of my head. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a trash bag, and started clearing out her things. The drawers she'd taken over with her clutter, gone. The bathroom cabinet filled with her endless lotions and perfumes, emptied. Piece by piece, I stripped her from this house. And it felt good, cathartic even. With every item I tossed, I felt a little lighter, like I was reclaiming the space she'd tainted with her lies. By noon, I had piled all her stuff in the living room, her clothes thrown into suitcases, her shoes lined up by the door. I wasn't playing games. I wanted her out of my life completely, and I didn't care if it hurt her feelings. She'd forfeited that right the moment she decided to sleep with another man. And then, just as I was about to lock up and head out to clear my head, my phone buzzed. It was her. Danny, can we please talk? I'm coming home now. Just, please, let's talk. I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. Part of me wanted to just block her number, throw the phone across the room, and never hear from her again. But another part of me, the part that still couldn't believe this was real, needed to hear what she had to say. Not because I was hoping for some magical explanation, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go to cover up what she'd done. So I sat down on the couch, the same one where we'd spent so many nights together, and waited. An hour later, she walked through the door. She didn't come in with the arrogance I'd expected. No smug look, no cold indifference. Instead, she looked disheveled, almost desperate. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her face pale, like she hadn't slept either. Good. I wanted her to feel as terrible as I did. Danny, please, can we talk? Her voice cracked as she stood in the doorway, her eyes darting between me and the pile of her stuff in the corner. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, arms crossed, waiting for her to start. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to see the consequences laid out in front of her. She stepped forward, her eyes filling with tears. I know I messed up. I know I did. But it's not what you think. I cut her off, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Oh, really? Because what I think is that you've been screwing Justin behind my back for months. What part of that is not what it seems? She flinched, the tears spilling over now. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I'd seen enough to know that her tears weren't for me. They were for herself. For the mess she was in. Danny, I never wanted this to happen. She sobbed, stepping closer. I was just, I don't know. I was lonely. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like we weren't connecting anymore. I didn't mean for things to go this far, I swear. Stop. I stood up, cutting her off again. Don't put this on me. Don't you dare make this about me being busy with work. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt. But instead, you lied. Over and over again. She wiped at her eyes, her face crumpling as she struggled to find the right words. But nothing she said mattered anymore. I saw through all of it. The excuses, the justifications, the deflection. I wasn't going to play into her narrative. I'm sorry, Danny, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say. I looked at her, feeling nothing but the cold weight of finality between us. You're not sorry you did it, Amanda. You're sorry you got caught. If I hadn't found out, you'd still be sneaking around with him, lying to my face. She didn't deny it. How could she? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. You're going to pack up the rest of your things today, and then you're leaving. For good. She blinked, the panic setting in. Wait, Danny, no. Please, we can work through this. I'll go to counseling, I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't. No, my voice was firm, cutting through her desperation like a blade. There's nothing left to work through. You made your choice, Amanda. And now I'm making mine. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. I wasn't begging for answers, wasn't falling for her tears. She had nothing left to manipulate. She stood there for a moment, like she was waiting for me to change my mind, to offer her some lifeline. But I didn't, couldn't. Finally, she nodded, her shoulders sagging in defeat. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll go. Without another word, she turned and started packing. I watched her move through the house, gathering the last of her things in silence. The woman I'd once loved, who I thought I'd spend my life with, was now just a stranger, a liar, someone I no longer recognized. When she was done, she stood by the door, holding her bags, her eyes puffy and red. She looked at me one last time, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something, but I didn't want to hear it. I'd heard enough. Goodbye, Amanda, I said quietly. She hesitated, then finally stepped outside, the door closing behind her with a soft click. And just like that, she was gone. I sat there for a long time after she left, the house feeling even emptier than before. But this time, it wasn't the kind of emptiness that felt suffocating. It was the kind of emptiness that meant something new could grow, something better. It would take time, I knew that. The betrayal still burned deep, and the scars would last a while. But I also knew, in that quiet, lonely moment, that I had done the right thing. I had taken back control of my life. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The house was quiet, too quiet. After Amanda left, I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the door she'd walked through. The silence wrapped around me, thick and suffocating at first. I'd never noticed how loud the absence of someone could be. No more lies, no more whispered excuses, no more tension, just nothing. And yet that nothing was comforting in its own way. I got up from the couch and walked through the house, taking in the emptiness. Her shoes were gone from the entryway. Her jackets no longer hung next to mine in the closet. The bedroom felt like a completely different space without her things cluttering every corner. I stopped by the dresser, staring at the empty spot where her perfume used to sit, the scent of her still faintly lingering in the air. It was strange. I thought I'd feel more devastated. But instead, there was this dull numbness settling in. like my brain hadn't quite caught up with everything that had happened. I knew it would hit me eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week from now, but right now I was just exhausted, worn down by months of suspicion, fights, and her endless manipulation. I needed a break from all of it. From her, from the house, from the memories. I grabbed my keys, deciding to drive. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I needed air, space to think, to clear my head. The roads were quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows as I drove through town. Familiar places rolled past, our favorite coffee shop, the park we used to walk through on weekends, the bar where we'd spent countless Friday nights laughing with friends. All of it felt tainted now. Every corner of my life had Amanda's fingerprints on it. And yet, I couldn't escape the sense that I'd been living in some kind of illusion for years. That the version of us I'd held onto so tightly had been a lie for a long time. One I'd clung to because it was easier than facing the truth. Had she ever really loved me? The thought hit me out of nowhere, sharp and painful. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to keep my mind from spiraling. I didn't want to think about that, not now. Not when I was finally free from her deceit. But the question gnawed at me. Had I been a placeholder for her all along? Someone she tolerated until something better came along, like Justin? I turned the car toward the edge of town, where the streets grew quiet and the fields stretched out for miles. There, away from everything, I could finally breathe. I pulled over on a dirt road, cutting the engine and stepping out into the cool air. The sky was streaked with the fading colors of sunset, the horizon glowing with hues of orange and pink. It was peaceful out here. For the first time in a long while, I let myself feel everything. The betrayal, the anger, the sadness. It all came rushing in at once, like a wave I'd been holding back for too long. I clenched my fists, wanting to scream, to let out every ounce of pain she'd caused me. But instead, I just stood there, the wind whipping through the fields, the sound of my own breathing loud in the quiet. I had loved Amanda. I had trusted her with everything I had. And in return, she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. Not just with her body, but with her lies, her manipulation, the way she twisted the truth and made me doubt my own reality. That hurt more than anything else. But as I stood there, staring out at the open fields, I realized something. I was free now. Free from the weight of her betrayal. Free from the constant suspicion and doubt that had been gnawing at me for months. Free to rebuild my life without her in it. I had been drowning in her lies for so long that I hadn't even noticed how much of myself I'd lost along the way. But now, with her gone, I could start over. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars she'd left behind would take time to heal. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I had control over my life again. I stood there for a long time, letting the cold wind whip around me, watching the last of the sun disappear beyond the horizon. It felt like the closing of a chapter. A painful one, yes, but one that needed to end. And as the darkness settled in, I realized that I wasn't afraid of what came next. By the time I got back in the car and started driving home, I felt lighter. The house wasn't going to feel like a home for a while, but it was my space now. No more secrets, no more lies. When I got back, I walked inside, flipped on the lights, and took a deep breath. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of her stuff still sitting by the door. I'd given her one day to get it all, and I meant it. Tomorrow, she'd come for her things, and that would be the last time I'd ever have to see her. I took a sip of the beer, letting the cold bitterness wash down my throat, and opened my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed, my lawyer's. I wasn't waiting for her to figure out her next move. I was filing for divorce first thing in the morning. No waiting, no second chances. I wasn't going to let her drag this out, pretend like there was something left to save. I'd spent too long holding on to the idea of Amanda, of who I thought she was, instead of seeing the truth. But not anymore. I hit send on the text. I need to talk about starting the divorce process. Can we meet tomorrow? It was done. I sat back, staring at the message. There was no turning back now, but I felt no regret. Just a strange kind of relief. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Picking up the pieces, rebuilding, figuring out who I was without her. But tonight, I let myself feel the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. Amanda had thought she could walk all over me, lie to me, use me until I wasn't useful anymore. But she was wrong. She wasn't coming back. Not ever. And I was going to be okay. The next morning felt different. For the first time in months, I woke up without that sinking feeling in my chest. No more dread. No more paranoia. Just a strange, unsettling calm. I stared at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything that had happened settle over me like a blanket. But it didn't crush me this time. It was just there. Part of my story now, not my whole world. I rolled out of bed, showered, and made coffee, moving through the house with a new sense of purpose. I had things to do, decisions to make. Amanda was coming to collect her things, but I wasn't going to let her disrupt my day. Today was about moving forward. I checked my phone. No messages from Amanda. That didn't surprise me. She'd been radio silent since I told her to pick up her stuff. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she was hoping I'd cool off and come crawling back, asking for some kind of reconciliation. But that wasn't going to happen. She didn't get to rewrite the script anymore. At 11 a.m. sharp, I walked into my lawyer's office. I'd been waiting for this moment, and there was a part of me that felt almost guilty for how relieved I was to be sitting here, pen in hand, ready to end things for good. But guilt was useless now. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, sat across from me, shuffling through the papers with the precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. She'd been recommended by a friend, and within minutes of our first meeting, I knew she was the right choice. She wasn't here for drama, and neither was I. "Okay, Danny," she said, sliding the paperwork in front of me. "This is the initial filing. Once you sign, we'll serve her, and she'll have 30 days to respond. Given the situation, it should be straightforward, but I'll need any information you have on joint assets, accounts, things like that." I nodded, picking up the pen. "It's all in the file I sent over. There's not much. We don't own any property together. Just a joint bank account and some savings." "Good," she replied, her voice steady. "This shouldn't take long then. You've made the right decision, Danny. I've seen too many people hold on to something that's already broken beyond repair. You're doing the smart thing." I didn't need her validation, but hearing it from someone who'd seen this all before gave me a sense of finality. I wasn't being rash. This was the only choice. I signed the papers without hesitation. "There," Karen said, taking the documents back and giving me a nod. "You'll be hearing from me as soon as we get a response. But for now, just focus on yourself. This is the first step." I stood up, shaking her hand, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "Thanks, Karen. I appreciate everything." I walked out of that office knowing I'd just taken control of my life in a way I hadn't for a long time. The weight of the past was lifting, and for the first time, I could see a future without Amanda clouding everything. There was no more waiting for her to fix things. No more waiting for her to change. I was done waiting. When I got back home, her car was parked in the driveway. I could see her silhouette through the window, moving around, gathering the last of her things. I paused for a moment, watching her, this woman I'd spent years with, someone I thought I knew. But now, she was just a stranger in my house, a memory I was ready to let go of. I walked inside, and she looked up as I came through the door. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, but I didn't feel anything. There was no anger left, no sadness, just emptiness. She was packing up her life, and I was watching it happen, detached from it all. "Danny," she said softly, her voice almost pleading, "I'm almost done. I didn't want to leave without talking to you first." I didn't say anything, just leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting for her to speak. Whatever she had to say, it didn't matter. But maybe she needed to get it out. Maybe I needed to hear it to close this chapter fully. "I know you're angry," she started, her hands trembling as she folded a shirt and placed it in a suitcase. "And you have every right to be. I screwed up. I know that. But this doesn't have to end like this. We can still—" "No, we can't," I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. "We're not doing this, Amanda. We're not pretending there's anything left to salvage. You made your choice, and now I've made mine." She bit her lip, tears welling up again. "Danny, please. I was lost, okay? I didn't know how to talk to you. I didn't know how to fix things. But I never meant to hurt you like this. I just—" I don't know what I was thinking. I watched her, not feeling an ounce of sympathy. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for what she'd lost. You didn't think, Amanda. That's the problem. You didn't think about me or our marriage or anything beyond what you wanted in the moment. And now it's too late. She wiped her eyes, staring at the floor. I just wish we could go back. I shook my head. We can't go back. You killed that chance the moment you chose him over me. For a moment there was silence. She knew, deep down, that there was nothing she could say to fix this. Her lies had poisoned everything, and there was no coming back from that. She could cry, she could apologize, but it was all meaningless now. Finally, she zipped up the last suitcase and stood by the door, her shoulders sagging under the weight of everything she destroyed. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know you are, I said quietly. But it's done. She nodded, her hand on the doorknob, pausing for a brief second. I could see the regret in her eyes, the realization that she had thrown everything away for nothing. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Goodbye, Danny, she said, her voice hollow, empty. I didn't respond. I just watched as she opened the door and stepped outside, closing it behind her with a soft click. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there, staring at the door, waiting for some rush of emotion to hit me. But it didn't come. All I felt was a quiet sense of closure. This was the end of something I thought would last forever. But in reality, it had died long before this moment. I walked over to the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against it for a second, letting out a long breath. The house was mine again. My life was mine again. And as strange as it felt, there was a peace in that realization. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was free, truly free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move forward. No more lies. No more waiting for someone to be who I wanted them to be. It was just me now, and that was okay. I turned away from the door, the house quiet around me, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. Felt like a fresh start.